Steve drove his pickup to work. The sun was coming out, melting the snow on this early spring Indiana day. There was something special about this time of year. His mind went back to when he first met his wife, the woman of his dreams. She was sitting at an outdoor cafe in Broad Ripple, the sun shining on her, creating a halo effect on her brown hair. She was wearing a red and black poncho with tan shorts and hiking boots. There did not seem to be a breeze, yet her hair moved as if a zephyr was ordered to make this angel comfortable. He was walking by, not in a hurry to get anywhere. It was a pleasantly cool morning. He noticed her sitting in the warmth of the sunlight, her head down reading a book. He was fascinated how the sun made a halo in her hair. Watching her, not paying attention to where he was going, he walked into an empty trash can. She heard the commotion and looked up. She had seen him looking at her as he tried to keep himself from falling over the trash can. She smiled and blushed, knowing what had happened. Their eyes locked, as if time stood still. She looked at him as he looked at her. He saw the sun break through the clouds, heard the birds chirping as nature was rejoicing that two people who were meant to be together had just met. He watched her as she took a sip of her coffee. Her eyes fluttered as she smiled, tasting the flavor of the gods. She looked the image of perfection as she finished her sip and then put her cup on the table. It was the first time he could remember seeing the twinkling of light in the corner of his eye. He had to stop and say something to this woman. Standing in front of her, he felt himself blush, heard himself talking. He was stuttering and stammering, searching for the correct words. He was embarrassed, but determined to talk to her. He watched her as he explained how the sun was shining on her hair, making a halo. He felt her eyes looking at him. She was not looking at his physical features, but she was looking in him, into his soul, and he could feel the warmth of her smiling eyes. He knew she was an angel, his angel. Later, she would say, when she first saw him, she thought it was cute that he stuttered and stammered. It showed he respected her, and she liked that. She knew he was the man for her also. She explained that most women would have been offended, but she could tell that he had a clear heart. Steve missed the way she always had a way of making the most difficult situations simple. She had a way of expressing herself that always made sense. She was in favor of his decision to make the military his career. Every time they had a military dance or an event, she was always the head of the party. Many of the generals' wives watched her and liked the way she carried herself. She did not walk. She sashayed with an elegance all her own. She was always soft-spoken and never said a harsh word to or about anyone. And this kindness caught the attention of many people. She was a good woman. He was grateful the military was so supportive in getting her all the help they possibly could. But in the end, she gave in to the cancer. She just ran out of fight. And he understood that many people would have been mad at God for taking away the best thing he had ever known. But Steve never questioned or blamed God. So long ago, yet it seemed like yesterday that they had met. Even when she was being treated for the cancer, she always had that energy about her essence, a warmth in her spirit, and that special depth in her soul. It was a beautiful day like today that God accepted his angel back into heaven. A tear came to Steve's eyes as he remembered her. Driving onto the base, something still bothered him. Something was not right. He had forgotten something he had not done or needed to do, or needed knowing. Whatever it was, he did not like this feeling at all. The military demanded perfection from everyone. He was a perfectionist. He did not allow himself or his people to miss important details that could cost lives. Steve, a captain in the Indiana National Guard stationed at Fort Harrison, Indianapolis, Indiana, He had an uneasy feeling. At first, he thought he was just missing his wife. But something else was not right. He kept seeing the light in the corner of his eye, like a light reflecting off a window just outside of his field of vision. He was looking over the reports for the next month's duty roster. The office was a bland one. It had only a wooden desk, 3 wooden straight chairs, 1 picture on the wall, the same picture Duke and Melody had in their homes. There was a picture of Duke, Caleb, and himself in Iraq during Desert Storm. An American flag was mounted on a pole in the corner behind his desk. In another corner were file cabinets and a round gray metal trash can, and a large stick about 5 feet long, slender on one end and flared on the other. He had spent the morning doing his duty roster schedules. Then his computer email chimed. It was an email message from military intelligence. A friend of his messaged that there was an inquiry into a friend of theirs, a man they called Duke. Steve read the email. "Hello, Steve. I saw this and thought you might be interested. An inquiry made by the Indiana State Police in Evansville about a retired member of the Special Forces." It gave no other information. Making some notes on the schedule, Steve heard a voice. "Thor." He jerked his head up. The last time he heard that was when he was in Iraq. Duke's command was under attack by a lone chopper. Steve remembered how Duke had pushed him out of the way of a bullet, saving his life, but the enemy chopper killed many other men, one of which was a friend of theirs, Caleb. Duke was having his chopper serviced and modified at a shop away from the pad where the other choppers were staged. Duke's chopper was warmed up and running to test the modifications when the attacking chopper made its first assault on the base. Duke jumped in his chopper, was able to take off before the enemy chopper had a chance to make another pass. Everyone at the base was watching as Duke chased the alien chopper down like a stray dog and shot it out of the sky. Steve knew that few men in the military were able to react as fast as Duke did that day, and everyone was glad he was on their side. "Thor!" Steve jerked his head up again, putting the papers down and calling the motor pool. "Weasel, get me a Humvee ready. I'll be there in 30 minutes, and this time make sure there's fuel in it." "But, sir," Weasel said, "I need authorization to sign out a vehicle." Steve barked into the phone. "Like all the other times you forged my name to authorizations?" The sergeant swallowed hard, knowing he had been caught. Weasel knew all the times he had forged the commander's signature had come to haunt him. Steve thought of the first time he had ordered the sergeant to do something. To get his point across, he shouted, "I don't care how I get what I want, as long as I get what I want. Now get me what I want!" Steve remembered the look of a weasel on the sergeant's face as he went to work getting the things that he needed. He barked into the phone, "Why do you think I assigned you to that position? I need someone who can think on their feet." With a smile in his face, Steve whispered, "Why do you think I named you Weasel?" "I'll need some standard provisions and some serious firepower." "Yes, sir!" shouted Weasel. "It'll be ready and fueled in a bag of goodies in the back seat when you're ready, sir." Steve hung up the phone. Lifting the phone receiver again, he dialed a 4-digit number. The military had taught him to repeat the question before he answered. "Hello, Commander. I have received some special information that could be of national interest. One of the elite team is in trouble." "Where is he, sir?" "I don't know exactly, sir, but I know how to get there." "Where did I get the information from, sir?" "Well, sir, I can't tell you that. It's not that I won't. I can't. See, this is very difficult to explain, sir." "No, sir, I have never lied to you or led you in the wrong direction before, sir." "Yes, sir, I'll be going alone." "Who's this relating to?" "Well, sir, we call him Duke." "Yes, sir, that Duke." Steve hung up the phone, looked at the picture of Duke, Caleb, and himself, remembering the war in Iraq, the attack, and how long it had been since they had talked. Steve grabbed his stick and walked out of his office. Wayne and Steve had a unique friendship. Even though many years had went by, when they got together, it was like they'd only missed several days. Their lives started where they had left off and never missed a beat. Weasel watched Steve walk up to the Humvee and put something in the passenger seat. It looked like a small log with a handle. Steve was tall, a well-built man with large arms, slender hips, a barreled chest with large, strong legs. He had white blonde hair that he kept in a standard military-style cut. Weasel was wary of Steve's ice blue eyes, the kind of eyes that never show what he's thinking. He opened the back door of the Humvee and looked into the bag of goodies he requested. Unzipping the duffel bag, there were 2 military-style survival knives, 3 handguns, 2 Uzis, 2 military-style shotguns, boxes and ammos, a GPS receiver, compass, and other provisions standard on a long-term survival expedition. Weasel smiled as Steve looked through the office window and winked at him in approval. Leaving the base, he saw Weasel in his rearview mirror, turning down Post Road to Interstate 70, and then to bypass 465, and then to Highway 67 South. The traffic had been smooth until he came to Switz City. Then traffic came to a stop. Steve heard Duke's voice again. Thor, where are you? Tapping his fingers on the steering wheel, wondering what Duke's problem. He was getting frustrated, watching the construction crew with nothing to do but hold their shovels and watch traffic back up. Putting the Humvee in 4-wheel drive, thinking, who needs a damn road anyway? He drove through the ditch and through the field. He heard several of the other people cheering and watched as other larger 4-wheel drive pickup trucks followed around the construction. Not knowing exactly where he was going, he drove southwest until he came to a crossroad, turning right into a small town. It had the look of being a town once supported by the mining industry, but now it was lost in the 1970s. He passed a small, closed gas station, a hardware store. The volunteer fire department showed signs of life as the chief scurried around doing daily preparations for emergencies. The Catholic Church had its windows boarded up, and the Moose Lodge looked like it had not had a meeting in years. Several other run-down, vacant buildings gave the town a spooky, depressed look. The local school architectural design illustrated at a time of social possibilities, economic potential, proudly displaying the stone blocks saying it was built in the 1930s, and was made of the white limestone plentiful in this area. Driving around to the corner of the town square, he saw another large limestone building, which seemed to be the county seat. Faded signs over the entrances guided people to the different departments and services and the police department. Across the street, several signs advertising available storefronts, now closed restaurants, a closed beauty salon, and other faded signs. The general store's door was open, with some cars in front of the building. Steve saw 2 junk pickup trucks and a Jeep Rubicon parked in front of the general store. He thought that the Jeep was probably Duke's. He saw people standing in the middle of the street between the general store and the courthouse. It did not look like a friendly conversation. Driving up to the crowd, he noticed the day was somehow different than when he left Indianapolis. The light was different, not brighter, not dimmer. A few clouds hung in the sky. He noticed that something made something different from the light at home. Steve saw that same flashing light in the corner of his eye, felt it tingling in his fingertips. A shiver went down his spine. How many times had he been to the doctor to have that checked out, only to be told there was nothing wrong and no adequate answer for what the cause of the light was? Yet he always knew when that light flickered in his eyes something very important was about to happen. The old man saw the shadows dancing as the Humvee rolled up. The shadows were excited and full of energy. It was the shadows that gave Old Man Schroeder the confidence and grit to go on and do things that he knew they wanted. He did not question if the shadows were a good or a bad thing. He just knew that they were always with him in one way or another. He was insulted that someone would stick their nose into his business of his son, and those who hurt his son and left his son in the gutter. He heard his seething voice whisper, "Who is this?" Still dressed in his casual uniform fatigues, Steve parked a Humvee in the middle of the street. As he got out, he heard someone say, "Who's this?" Carrying his stick, Steve got out with a smart-ass snarl came across his face as he yelled, "I'm glad you asked. Back home in Tennessee, they call me Buford." Wilbur watched as the log fell off Steve's shoulder. He felt a small tremor of an earthquake as the stick hit the ground and shuddered in fear as he heard Steve spit the words toward the crowd. "But my friends and enemies call me Thor." Old Man Schroeder laughed at Steve. "Ha ha! Who are you kidding? You're outnumbered 3-1. There are 9 of us and 3 of you. Woodard's big enough to take all of you by himself." Thor roared his famous laugh. "Ha ha ha! That's right, old man. You're outnumbered 1-3. Give up now while you can." Steve's smile turned into a Buford snarl, then to a Thor grimace of determination. His eyes were ablaze with anger and anticipation. Steve raised his stick to the crowd. Just then, several squad cars came around the town square corner, with lights flashing, and stopped between the two groups. Captain Williams got out of his car, not saying anything, just leaning on the open door, looking at Old Man Schroeder. Williams and Schroeder locked eyes. A full minute passed. Williams had a look in his eye that said, "I ain't telling you again." Old Man Schroeder lowered and bobbed his head as a sign for the group to mount up and leave, mumbling to himself, "I'll be back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but I'll be back." After the Schroeder clan had left, Williams walked up to Duke, speaking in a soft whisper that shouted authority and commanded respect. "Heard about what happened at the truck stop. Don't blame you. But this is my town, and that is their country. Get up in them hills and you're on your own. You understand?" Melody took a breath as she started to speak. Duke touched her arm with a look in his eye that said, "Let me handle this." With a stone-cold face, Duke nodded at Captain Williams. Williams understood, then walked back to his car. Before getting in, he took a long look at Steve. Finally, the 2 squad cars sped off into the distance, leaving a cloud of dust behind them. Williams had been around long enough to know that behind every story there was a sliver of truth somewhere. He had his hands full, and this was not over with yet. He needed some more information about what was going on. He needed to talk to Charlie. Williams looked at the radio as the sheriff keyed the mic. "Did you see the size of that guy they called Thor?" Williams did not answer. He knew that the police radio was no place to talk about police matters. Too many people had scanners and listened to them. Oftentimes, the scanner just helped to stir up hate and discontent in a remote place like this. Williams headed to Mary Ellen's. He needed to talk to Charlie.